A human being in front of a camera with a voice. What do his teeth look like, Mommy? I got a couple missing. I just lost one down here. But hello, I'm the guy to wake up America. Wow, that sounds like a big job, Joe. Yeah, I've been working at it most of my life, but in particular when I hit about 23 and had my first experience of marijuana. My friend at law school was reading The Doors of Perception by Huxley, wondering what it's like if our brains did better than usual. The Doors of Perception. Imagine somebody naming their offering to our thinking. I offer to humankind a new compass, a solar compass for sorting humanity. That alone gives me the right to say hello to everybody in the world who has a birthday. I'm the next Einstein, I propose. A solar compass is a big deal. It's like the periodic table of the elements. It's a very important, useful sorting of our ways of being human so that we can give democracy another chance to figure out how people can think together usefully, progressively, efficiently. A solar compass to help that happen. I got 6 people with their hands raised. Which one should I call? What are their birthdays? What's the birthday of the person who just spoke? Birthday thinking. I propose that I have managed to rescue birthday from astrology. My solar compass is the proposition that birthday amounts to a fundamental dimension of our relationship with the sun. In terms of the power of the sun, billions of nuclear explosions, and we're worrying about 1 or 2. I just heard on the news today the U.S. tried out some rocket that can do a whole bunch of them nukes. And I also read recently that for the price of one of those military adventures, we could cancel all student debt as a clue to America needing a new government. Which is mainly why I turned on the camera, folks. Here I be, Joe Friendly, with a friendly revolution. Revolution made simple. Human beings finding a guy who can articulate clearly and simply what needs to be faced by the American people so we can wake up and in the name of humanity create a sensible social system which encourages good things happening. We are a sick society, and one of the important sicknesses I'll try to straighten out is truthfulness. There are truths we need to face about U.S. wrongdoing that prove in an emotionally satisfying way, I suppose, the logic of replacing them, that they are unfit, being so evil in Vietnam, Chile, Nicaragua, Cuba, Libya. What would it be like, America, facing that reality? While the media was saying what we're doing was promoting freedom, we were putting in power to replace who the people wanted, somebody who would do what our big money characters want, the corporations, the rich guys, the secret disease of America. Instead of democracy, we got the money factor turning us into a moneyocracy. And I'm the guy to bring up the subject because I do propose the solution. I propose this language. We build a government in waiting so that we then gracefully as a people can say, yeah, we worked out the discussion. It was tricky how to replace a whole system of powers with some try at a real democracy. But that is what I hear proposed. Instead of the world blowing up with nukes, we actually offer with our brains some wisdom happening in human history. Joe Friendly, not always my name. I was born with the name Arthur Myron Rubin, but I did get a New York court ruling that I could switch over to Joseph W. Friendly. So my name is, in fact, legally now Joe Friendly, Joseph W. Friendly. I didn't tell the court when I changed it what the W stood for. But I was going to share with the public, like I do here now, that it stood for whatever I feel like at the moment, maybe. I gave myself that opportunity to play with Friendly with different first names or earlier names or stuff like that. Hello, Joe Friendly, and then with a W. Okay, I got the point. All right. Just stumbling a little there, pal, but okay. What would it be like for America to wake up? That's what I invite us to wonder about. America waking up, what it would feel like. Wow, they got this guy and he says it's been really bad, worse than we thought, but he's cooked up some kind of a revolution, what's he call it, a friendly revolution, where we talk out loud up front first before we do the stuff. We work it out that it does sound reasonable for us to switch over control from a few billionaires to the people. That problem is happening, and we do got to recognize it. And what's the obvious solution? We ceremoniously, at some moment in human history, announce, boing, we here switch over authority. Instead of the going game, a new system of ownership of for and by the people. A people urging morality to be maximized in their culture, replacing the culture of what I often call commercialism to one that is truly well-meaning. I studied law and learned that language was being used as toys, weapons, treated with some reverence, worthiness. But before I studied that stuff, I had already studied science and even engineering. And I saw, I witnessed, I experienced words used comfortably, honestly, but not worshipped. Just the means of thoughts. The thought was the thing, not the word. The word was just a hint at how to get to the thought, I thought. The aim of the revolution. That got kind of spiritual there, Joe. Yeah. I do think we should think out loud about religion. Is there a guy in the sky? Don't we know enough about reality to realize that one of those dots in the sky could be a galaxy with millions of suns? And who knows how many extra satellites for those suns, like little old Earth is for our little sun. Our reality, our little speck on the Earth, threatening the end of it all with a quarrel over a nuclear reactor between Putin and Biden. Our moment in history, that horrible scare. The end of the world, more or less, out of control. Putin has reason to pop the cork. We cheated him. The United States was a major force in the breakup of the Soviet Union. I offer the proof of that on the internet, on my YouTube channel, a talk by Sean, S-E-A-N, Sean Gervasi. Gervasi. How would you spell that? Gervasi. He gives a talk, about an hour and a half. A guy who had worked for the United Nations to police propaganda, cheating, to decode games that were being played with public thought, cheating on truth. Sean Gervasi offers a lecture, a public lecture in the northern suburb of New York City. I loaned out my camera to my dear friend Beth Lamont, and she set it up nice. The sound was good. When I make a video, the sound is appreciated as a fundamental dimension of the production. I do aim to get good sound. And right now you can see I'm playing with that halo around my head. Hello, America. There is this one guy. He's living in Manhattan. Joe Friendly is named by order of some court way back. How far back? Oh, around 1980. I changed from Art Rubin to Joe Friendly. Art Rubin. Does that help you understand me better, to see me as Art Rubin? For a change, I'm going to look at you instead of the viewfinder. Marijuana needs to be talked about more as we legalize it. decriminalize it, not quite welcome it. Imagine senior centers, old people's homes, and we have us volunteer pot people dressed in green march into the old centers and pass out forms of marijuana that are consistent with scientific wisdom. Instead of lighting a cigarette where you got the burning part and then you can electronically control the temperature so that you heat up those parts of the cannabis plant, the hemp plant. You heat up little parts of the buds, the beginnings of growing seeds from flower to seed. Somewhere in that transition from flower to seed is the bud we smoke or mix it with chemicals and get the good stuff out of it and offer that in some other form like candy. A big argument. Get ready. In contrast to alcohol and the other bad guys, tobacco and heroin, cocaine, instead of all of those drugs, what is special about hemp, cannabis, marijuana, is that all over our bodies, you can name systems, regions, cells, a great many, even maybe a majority of our human cells in our body are connected to what the scientists call the endocannabinoid system that responds to cannabis-like chemistry that the body produces itself. One of the things attributed to these special cannabis receptor cells in our body, they got two kinds, the CB1s, cannabis 1s, and CB2s, and they're all over the place throughout our nervous system, for example. And here's a punchline. When the body activates CP1, CP2, when they get activated in our endocannabinoid built-in system of blood chemistry, physiology, medicine, in our understanding of what goes on, the cannabis receptors, when activated in the nervous system, particular cells, they are within the range of influence in some kind of physiological contact. They could be touching, they could be exchanging liquids, but in the different kinds of ways cells in our bodies do their function. The built-in body's cannabis receptors that marijuana can talk into our bodies with, when they're stimulated, it is described in the books as making the connections between the nerve cells as they transfer signals, information, to talk to the next guy to spread the word. They're part in the chain. is, to use some words, improved, turned on louder. The word I like is, I've heard scientists lecture using this word, and I cherished a moment. They said the cannabis receptors in the nervous system near the up close, up the nerve cells, their role is to enhance synaptic connections. Synaptic means the way nerves do share information, signals. There's like a chemical click, pop, called a synapse. A pulse getting transmitted, some electricity sent over, some energy that tickled, provoked. Marijuana is about to be legal, and it could be a remedy to our problem of people coming to the truth. Marijuana being not a drugged out idea, but a improvement in our functioning. Recognizing Thomas Jefferson and George Washington took marijuana seriously. They appreciated how it offered them paths of thinking that were positive alternatives to their earlier experiences subject to a ruler, a king. And when you suffer that indignity, it has an effect on your consciousness. Marijuana brings that somewhat back alive. And how to hold on to that, how to grab it, how to insist on it. A puzzle. I do propose that we encourage marijuana as part of America waking up to how wrong things have been and how we can, as a people, build a government in waiting, a system in waiting, an economic system in waiting. We can build a new reality. We have that right as a people. That what we got now is an evil empire situation. Our government pretends it's doing good stuff, but really, shame, shame. Why have we been picking on Cuba so long, America? The real dynamic was that they didn't want socialism as a competitor in the game with capitalism, commercialism. Who's supposed to win? Capitalism was arguing to the public with its media, don't try it, it won't work. The market system is the way to deal with human nature, and them socialists, they're into, they don't got it figured out so good like us businessmen people, and yakety yak and bap bap. When what is communism and socialism? They're aiming for a higher way to play than the business world. Caring and living that care about each other instead of turning it off to keep your job. That's what America waking up is, in my hope. I'd be the guy to say, let's switch over from the marketplace to where we need to create new places. We need to replace our current notions of religion and begin to learn how to think together as a people, aiming for some unity, achieving some simplicity, And I do offer new hope for achieving that with my claim of a scientific discovery about humanity that I propose here. Hello, people. The solar engine for my revolution. Why, you got to listen to me about the birthday stuff, and then I hit you with the economics. How we, the people, can take power from the rich few, the circle of billionaires, using social media for people to realize, hello, it is better for the people to be in control than the billionaires. And it's time to do another one of them we the people revolutionary. Yeah, what's your idea, Joe? Peaceful revolution. We just, I was going to say cling to the obvious, get a grip on it. We're talking what a real democracy, what a real government of, for, and the people, of, for, and by the people. That's the aim of the new struggle, to really aim in that direction. A government of, for, and by the people. And that would include the economic system. That's the important help I insist upon. Joe Friendly with the Solar Compass and Peaceful Revolution. What's your peaceful revolution? I say we are a fooled people. We didn't realize our government was so evil. Like the Roman Empire, we were a cruel. Whoops, I wonder. Hello. That was one of many I get saying this call was about an earlier communication from your electric company about a rate reduction. I've gotten that call more than 10 times. So what I'm proposing is that those insults, those wastes of our time, we can change our reality so that clink. Currently, if you get the right electronics, you can look at the numbers and you can even set up systems so they reject those numbers. I'm not there intellectually, mentally to do that trick at this point. My phone is not that capable currently. I've owned phones that were, but not now. America, here be Joe Friendly in the variety of ways he has of being Joe Friendly. He claims a solar compass for humanity that we can learn about by gathering in groups. I propose a whole bunch of male June 10s and female December 10s enjoying meeting each other and talking. I claim that birthdays 6 months apart appreciate each other's ways of being human. There's a natural support, a harmony. Birthdays 6 months apart. Let's enjoy that feature of humanity while we still got some humanity. Oh, please, Ukraine, don't be a nuclear disaster. The U.S. cheated Russia. They have the right to be angry. We should acknowledge, apologize, admit we were wrong, cruel, we cheated. We caused the breakup of the Soviet Union. Our government, Reagan and all those guys, they hired the Rand Corporation to come up with a think tank project, winning the yakety yak. Anyhow, Rand Corporation came up with 4 categories of things for us to do. One of them was when the Russians were considering their budgets with their government, the U.S. would use its Navy to challenge the Russian Navy to show off that our more expensive inventory of ships could do insults to their Navy, pushing them to spend more in their upcoming budget on the military. And I think the American people should definitely know, here I'll be the one to tell you, that Osama bin Laden was paid. He was an employee of the United States government in Afghanistan to help bring down the Soviet Union. Russia didn't even want to go into Afghanistan. The U.S. did cruel, horrible bombings in Afghanistan, so their president pleaded with Russia to come in and help save them. And they didn't want to, but eventually they did, and the U.S. called it an invasion. When what was going on was we were already hiring Osama bin Laden to give weapons and encouragement to the different tribes that were all around Afghanistan. Afghanistan is isolated tribes all over the place, and we were paying like $350,000 a year to Osama bin Laden to be the U.S. agent to teach them how to use explosives. We would give him the explosives, the weapons. He would teach the tribes how to use them. And then they would cause so much grief that the elected leader of the country in Afghanistan pleaded with the Russians to bring their military in and help. And what helped bring down the Soviet Union big time was the U.S. supplied Osama bin Laden with surface-to-air weaponry to shoot down airplanes and helicopters. And we produced a lot of that, transferred it for Osama bin Laden to distribute to the different tribes, complete with lessons how to use it, and they started shooting down Russian planes when they came over, military planes. And Russia lost a surprisingly large amount of airplanes and helicopters that helped bring down the Soviet Union. The cost was so high. Accomplished by our employee, Osama bin Laden. Okay, here I go. America, America, I offered you a solar compass. I said 6 months apart is mutual harmony. One thing I've learned is that June, July is about words. June are good at the spoken word. July are good at the written word. I do here declare, report, announce that one of my discoveries is when I meet someone born particularly the first half of July. When I meet somebody born from July 1 to whatever, 15, 16, 18, 12, I say to them, I know something you love. And I choose the word love because it is attention getting. It's strong language. That's sort of like something extreme, a whole bunch. Love, something I love. That's what I do when I meet people born in the front of July. And it gets their attention and they say, okay, what? And then I say one word. Five letters. The plural of book. I say books. And they regularly say back, you're right, I do love books. I've discovered that as a offering that my birthday compass is for real. That there's something about books. They're an achievement of language that we don't walk around expressing. Ideas are so packaged up close. So much happening as we read compared to listening to some guy talking. Me, hopefully an exception. Attention readers, here be Joe. So, the astrology name for those guys is Cancer. Now that is a hell of a name, it sure sounds like the disease, don't it? We could say the bookies. July and some of June, when the days are long and the heat that some find problematic, the baby just popped from a 98.6 temperature can make their peace with the summer heat. So they get a lot of light at the beginning compared to other birthdays where it's kind of dark and it gets even darker, for example. That's the solar compass, appreciating that as a people. So we can watch on television a whole bunch of people of the same birthday responding to questions in the same way, or different kinds of challenges besides questions, situations. We can learn as a people the characteristics of the different birthdays if we use our resources deliberately in that direction. I propose we do. That as a people we should discover the different features of birthdays so that democracy has a new chance at survival and arrival. About 9/11, Part of our waking up is to realize that 9/11 is a big lie, a fooled people. The collapse of those buildings was not because of jet fuel fire. The collapses occurred an hour or more after the plane hits. A little less than an hour, Joe, on the South Tower. Okay. The South Tower that got hit second came down first. The fires were going out, folks. It was not a building ablaze. It was kind of dark. It was a big building, and the fire wasn't doing much, and there wasn't that much bad stuff happening in the towers. WTC 1, World Trade Center 1 and 2. And what I point to, America, is this important clue. Or maybe two clues. One clue is that the speed, about an hour, a little less than an hour after the South Tower was hit second, it started crumbling and came down 120 floors in somewhere of the order of 12, 15 seconds. That only happens if computer-controlled demolition pops all the beams at the same time so that there's no beams holding up anything, and then the building collapses in on itself. The company who did the demolition advertised that when they bring a building down, they arrange for the steel as it's cut for the demolition to be cut at lengths to conveniently fit on flatbed trucks around 30, 32 feet. And that is what happened. The steel came down already cut, and they were loading more than 100 trucks a night. Early on, in the first week of the 9/11, there was already hundreds of truckloads a night of steel. Loaded only at night because they didn't want the public to know about it. No pictures, folks. 100 truckloads. It was difficult to pull that trick off. They had to deal with waiting truck drivers, where to park the trucks. 9/11 was the U.S. government fooling us so we could expand our empire into additional countries, calling them the terrorists, the bad guys, blaming them when it was Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, and are you ready for a newish name? Zellico. How do you spell that? Z-E-L, Zell, I-K-O-W, cow, Zellico. Philip Zellico. He's the guy, America, we need to wake up to, point to, as we climb out of the big lie. A myth foisted upon us by a myth master. What'd you say there, Joe? I didn't get it. What's that again? A myth master? What's a myth master? 9/11 was a myth. We pretended that the tragic collapse of those buildings was because Arabs wanted to scare us. Terrorism, terrorize us. Terror, that word is a step worse than scare. Big time scare, terror. We were blaming the Arabs for trying to scare us. And that's why we made a 20-year war on Afghanistan after we were already monkeying around in there bringing apart the Soviet Union. And then we blame Osama bin Laden for 9/11, even though he does make an effort to publicly proclaim, no, he wasn't in on 9/11. Here's what I reveal, America. On September 12th, 2000, exactly 1 year before 9/11, the owners of the World Trade Centers, the World Trade Authority, made a public request for bids for a company to come upon the scene and remove all remaining vinyl asbestos floor tiles, take them somewhere, and that ain't easy because asbestos isn't welcome here and there, but get rid of them and maybe even stick some other kind of tiles up there. And they had paid of the order of $300,000, $800,000 to companies to do a floor or two around the building, but now they wanted somebody to take on the job of both towers, everything, maybe even World Trade Center 7 probably. Complete access to all their property in the name of, what was the problem? Vinyl asbestos floor tiles. And why are you taking them out? Can you guess why that is? Because asbestos causes cancer. Yeah, but how's it jump out of the tiles and get into your body? Hey, get that guy out of here. He's causing us trouble. We don't want to talk about that. You're pointing out the obvious. Yeah, there's no good reason to want to get rid of them. That's true. But you see, we had this other asbestos problem. The asbestos foam, 1.5 inches on the steel to protect it from burning. So if a jet hit and set fires, our steel wouldn't burn. We put that on all the steel. And it's been coming off, and New Yorkers are breathing it, and the government ordered the World Trade Center to hire a company to solve that problem, to get rid of all the asbestos foam on the steel and replace it with fiberglass. So the government ordered the World Trade Authority to do that, to replace that asbestos foam with fiberglass in all the structural steel. So the owners asked companies to come forward with estimates, and the lowest bid to do that was $2 billion. The buildings were only worth about $3 billion, $4 billion apiece. To make a long story short, the work was not performed. The owners decided not to do it. And some years later, the government said, hello, we ordered you to get rid of the asbestos and you haven't done it, and New Yorkers are breathing and dying. And the owners of the building said, could we please just bring them down? We're not renting out enough even to make money on it. Somehow, it's not a popular place for people to visit offices of the business world that came. Could we please bring down the buildings with controlled demolition? The owners asked the government. And the government said, no, too dangerous. No, not dangerous, too disease causing by asbestos. So they asked for the demolition. They were turned down by the government, but behind the scenes, the planning was going on Oh no, wait, no, excuse me. No, I think what I'll point to a different direction. I had just said on September 12, 2000, the owners made an invitation to replace the vinyl asbestos floor tiles. The winning bid for that, I don't think I gave you the number yet. A mere $1 million, even though they had paid 300 grand or whatever for a floor or two. And the company, LVI Services Incorporated, the letters LVI Services Incorporated, the president, Burton Freed, I think he was an attorney as opposed to an engineer or an architect. The company had previously, right before that bid of a mere $1 million, they had just done a government contract, which was apparently they're being taught by the government how to use new explosives developed by the government. And let me tell you about one of the explosives. Not only a solar compass, but Joe Friendly explains as America wakes up the explosive they used in 9/11. Actually, two, but they were brothers. The first thing is that around 1890, as they were building the railroad, they started using a simple mixture of aluminum powder and rust powder. The chemical name for rust powder is iron oxide, ferrous oxide. It's a mixture of iron and oxygen. That's rust. There's about 20% oxygen in our air. The steel attracts it. The atoms mingle and they become molecules, iron oxide, rust, that you can brush off, scrape off, and you have that powder in a bag, rust, ferrous oxide, powder you can buy from the chemistry store, a brown powder, ferrous oxide. And they discovered in 1890 that if you just take that rust powder and mix it with aluminum powder and you ignite it with a metal match, I forgot the name of the metal, but there are some metals that burn and they reach a temperature of around 500-600 degrees. And you ignite the mixture of ferrous oxide and aluminum powder with a match of that temperature. And what happens is the oxygen that's connected to the iron atom, the ferrous oxide, that oxygen somehow is attracted and gets pulled over to the aluminum, forming aluminum oxide, and the iron is then freed. It's all alone, just a happy iron atom or two. They might join up by themselves and become I2 for all I know. But anyhow, when there is this transfer of the oxygen from the ferrous oxide to the aluminum, there suddenly is a release of large amount of energy that results in temperatures more than 4,000 degrees. 4,200, 4,300, 4,500, more than 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit achieved when you light iron oxide and aluminum powder with some kind of extra hot match or electric spark. A temperature more than 4,000 degrees they discovered in 1890 as they were building the railroad. They used that to connect, to forge a connection of solid steel from one rail to the next. Because steel melts at a mere 2750, let's say 2800. And here we're hitting them with 4,000. So the steel melts quick. And then you take away the temperature and it hardens up again. So they built the railroad by fusing together the rails, heating them up. I picture they use wood and sand to guide the welding to happen. So that chemical discovery that when you mix aluminum powder and rust, you can achieve temperatures of the order of 4,000. That's what they use in the demolition business. They package that mixture in cylinders that can be tied to steel with electric ignition that can be radio controlled. And those are called cutting charges. When they go off, they apply a temperature of 4,000 degrees at some geometry on a piece of steel. And if this is the piece of steel and you attach it, clunk, the top will fall off. What they do on 9/11 was they cut it on a 45-degree angle so the top part would slide off and not be supported any longer by the structural steel below. Meanwhile, what's the story? The company who did the demolition said they bring the steel down in lengths around 30 feet. And where were the steel beams that held up the building? The World Trade Center had an unusual construction. The buildings were held up by a central core of very solid steel that went up before the rest of the building got built, and then, well, it went up slowly. As it got built, the rest of the building got built around it. But the point is, the support of the floors of the building was the center core, and then long branches that would connect to the outer wall. So the outer wall was strong to support those supports for the floor. They call them trusses. And the location of those core beams turned out to be mostly in each elevator shaft. By riding on top of the elevator, demolition crews had access to one of those heavy-duty core beams that were located in the corners of the elevator shafts. The elevator shafts were built among the core beams. They were in the middle of the building. You would get off, and there would be no columns That was an architectural advantage to this form of construction. So 9/11 involved the LVI Services Demolition Company coming in pretending to be worried about vinyl asbestos floor tiles, when actually they were a skilled, experienced demolition company that had just been trained by the military and pretended it was a job they could get paid for. So the LVI Services Incorporated people attached cutting charges to the core beams every 30-some feet, and they were loading hundreds of truckloads of this steel that had come down already cut early on. But here's the next point. The building was made of concrete flooring on those trusses. It was about 4.5 inches thick. It was poured on corrugated steel plates, piped up there somehow and just dumped on these corrugated steel plates. And on 9/11, when the buildings came down, all of that concrete, just about, virtually all of it, had turned into what they described as extremely fine dust. Well, America, as we wake up, we realize, hello, that don't happen when a jet hits your building and the floors start pancaking down and somehow it all turns to, what you call it again? Extremely fine dust. In 2009, 8 years later, there was a scientifically published paper. It could have been published earlier, but it wasn't easy for the scientists to point out this truth to the American people. It was published in Denmark. It was discovered in all the dust samples examined by the scientists from 9/11, from the ground zero scene, that dust, the concrete that had turned to extremely fine dust. In all that dust, scientists found high-tech nanothermite. Nanothermite. Well, I was telling you that these cylinders of aluminum powder and rust powder were in a cylinder, radio controlled, that would cut the steel. Now I'll tell you about nano. Nano is a whole world of new technology that, as they learn how to do tricks with lasers, one of the things they learn how to do is to make things real small. So they took the recipe for aluminum and iron powder, ferrous oxide. They took those ingredients and they made them laser small. And they ignited it, and not only did it achieve the recommended more than 4,000 degree Fahrenheit temperature, but they realized they had created an explosive that had more pop, more force when they went off than TNT, dynamite. A new explosive that had more explosive power per amount. Like you have a couple of grams and you pop it off, and how many square feet, this and that. So they said, wow, a new explosive that is so explosive, a little bit goes a long way, you know? Why don't we spray it on and see how that works? So they mixed it with paint, and they applied it to this thing to explode. And they tried to ignite it, and it wouldn't ignite. It wouldn't go off because they just mixed paint with the powder, and the paint was keeping the elements from sufficient touching of each other. And what they found in the 9/11 extremely fine dust was how they solved that technical problem. They had tiny ceramic wafers, smaller than a diameter of like 1/4 of an inch, smaller than that. And on top of them is a reddish foam. And they examined that foam microscopically, and it was many bubbles, and within the individual bubbles were little red cubes nestled with tiny little aluminum plates in the bubbles. So you have the aluminum as a plate, the ferrous oxide as several cubes in a little sphere, repeated thousands and thousands of times. We're talking individual bubbles of foam on these tiny ceramic wafers in all the 9/11 dust. The explosive in which the paint can then be mixed in there, and it protects the touching relationship of the ferrous oxide and the aluminum. They're in their little bubbles hanging out together. And as long as we're going to do it right, a nice flat fit instead of crude dust, where there is a variety of shapes trying to touch each other. Instead of that, ideal touching, several cubes in a little bubble up against an aluminum plate that somehow the U.S. government taught the LBI Services Corporation how to paint on the underflooring, the underside of the flooring. Remember I said they poured the concrete on corrugated steel plates. They had access to that underside of the flooring by riding on top of the elevators. There was like a 2.5-foot space between the ceiling of one floor and the flooring of the next one up. And by removing some kind of partition board, they could go in there and spray explosive. And all of that concrete turned to dust. They sprayed plenty of that stuff around, apparently. American people, wake up to that big lie that they found in all the dust, these ceramic wafers with aluminum and little cubes of ferrous oxide and little bubbles. And those little cubes of ferrous oxide, they were red, orange. That's what gave the wafers that reddish color that the media said were paint chips. As if there had been a lot of red paint all over the place. Oh, excuse me, where was the red paint? It's orange, buddy. Somewhere in there between red and orange. Hello, America. Joe Friendly coming at you with some truth for our times so that we can wake up as a people and realize we have been fooled with a lie. that 9/11 wasn't to be blamed on Arabs, but members of our own government. I'm about talked out at the moment, but eventually I'll get to Zellico. Maybe I'll go to Zellico now. Hello, Zellico, Philip Zellico. He led a group of, well, he lectured with two other guys in Colorado in 98, 99. They invited intellectuals. This was the rule by the rich club, I guess you could say. They got together and they cooked up 9/11. The titles for some of their seminars, no, their published summary of these meetings, seminars, was Catastrophic Terrorism, Elements of a National Policy. So that's where I remember the second page of their 160 whatever article with that title, Catastrophic Terrorism, Elements of National Policy. The second page said if there were to be a terrorist incident that killed several thousand, it would be an opportunity if we hit the game running with propaganda campaign to go for minerals in the east, the west, southeast. And they did even say out loud about an assault on our constitutional freedoms. More surveillance, I think, was what they said out loud. Softening restrictions on violating Bill of Rights, human rights, citizen rights. They did think out loud in that direction. Philip Zellico was the leader. The two other guys were Ashton Carter, at that point just a professor, who then eventually was appointed head of the military of the United States, the Secretary of Defense. And the other guy, Jonathan Deutsch, who had been, oh, did I name the first guy was what was the first guy? I have trouble remembering his name. Oh, Ashton Carter. And the other guy was Jonathan Deutsch. He had been the boss of the CIA for a while. So those three led a seminar in which Clinton was in office, I guess, but Bush, the people who won the Bush president race, they came along. And there was this planning a 9/11 seminar. So even though Liz Cheney has been acting so heroically, there is the sad reality that her father cooked up the 9/11 big lie. That is a reality that's part of the complexity of it all. Sorry, Liz. But then again, you are a right-winger, which means you side with the rich instead of the poor. That's what right-wingers are about. I do propose, as the American people wake up, we do come to our senses that the Republicans versus the Democrats is a messy bunch of nonsense, that the Republicans don't believe in democracy. They believe in rule by the rich. And when they get a chance, they undo our democratic voting system. And I do propose we replace that with a people's peaceful revolution. We designed a government in waiting as a people peacefully before the revolution, and then we ceremoniously say, and now we make it happen, clink. Instead of drinking, how about, although by then I do propose that we just figure out the right temperatures that we control electrically so that we can aim at just the right chemistry to transfer the chemicals, the cannabinoids, to our cannabis receptors. Our cannabis receptors, our body has built-in cannabis receptors. So part of this revolution is to encourage good marijuana highs. We aim with our highs at finding more of ourselves, becoming more alive, free, imaginative. That as we're able to think with our minds in greater ways, let's encourage using that ability to imagine a government in waiting, how things ought to be. How should things be? How things could be. Instead of blowing up the world, let's have a peaceful transfer, ownership from the rich few to all of us, humanity given a second chance to thrive. I'll tell more about Zellico. What can we say about Zellico? After the World Trade Center, the widows of some of the guys who had been working in the towers and got killed, nearly 3,000, some of the widows pleaded with the government, the president, the executive branch for an investigation. It took them 440 days before President Bush said, okay, we'll have an investigation, and I am appointing to lead the investigation Henry Kissinger. And then the women who had gotten that far had a meeting with Kissinger about 2 weeks or less after he had been appointed. And they reminded him, when they reminded him that so many of his customers for his public relations firm that he had started as a way to sell his influence in government, he had a firm that took money to advocate in favor of different nations. And among the nations were the Saudi Arabian people that had a role in 9/11. And when they reminded of that the Saudi Arabian connection, I think it was them or some nation nearby, made him a corrupt, no good boss of an investigation in which there were some Arabs involved. When they pointed that out to him, they were eating at a restaurant apparently, and he dropped his drink. It crashed. And he quit. And then the government appointed to replace him Zellico. Zelikow, Philip Zelikow. And there's a book written about him and how he steered around the 9/11 Commission by a guy named Philip Shennon, Shennon, for the New York Times, a reporter, who wrote a book about Zelikow's role in the 9/11 Investigation Commission, in which he bossed it around drastically. He appointed the participants, the lawyers. Nobody got to publish except him. Shennon points out that Zelikow apparently walked in with a outline of what he wanted to find. But the 9/11 Commission didn't find any of this stuff that I'm talking about. And here's the punchline, and then I'll let us pause for a while. The punchline. You got a punchline, Joe? Yeah, here's the punchline. Online, I discovered Zelikow's resume, and he lists for his special skills the creation and maintenance of public myth. Joe Friendly, a voice for our times. What do you think? Did I earn my attention?